So today what we're going to be covering is a little bit of review of the 5/7 chord and 5 chord in inversion and how to analyze that, so that when you come to a piece of music and you're trying to understand what it's about, what people like Bach or Beethoven have done, you have the right tools to analyze that. So if we take a look at this example, we first have to determine what key we are in. It's either F major or D minor. We start with an F chord, we end with an F chord. It seems pretty clear we are in F major. Uppercase letter, since it's major, colon. We see that this is F, A, C, doubled. So that is our 1 chord. Since the A is in the bass, it's in first inversion, so we label that 1/6. B flat, D, F. That is our 4 chord. And we have an A right here, 8th note on the and of beat 1. Chances are that's not part of the chord. Chances are we're not changing chords. So we're probably going to be analyzing that as a non-chord tone. So we have to then circle it and then say, how is it approached? How is it resolved? It's approached by step and then resolved by step in the same direction. So that is a passing tone. We label it right there above the tenor voice. We then go to C, C, E, G. That is a 5 chord. And then B flat, D, doubled F. Now this bears a little discussion. That is a 4 chord in first inversion. Normally, 5 does not resolve to 4. 4 goes to 5, not the other way around. Why does this work? The answer is 5 does go to 6. And if you say, well, what is the difference between the 6 chord, which we would have expected, which would be D, F, A, and the 4 chord in first inversion, which would be D, F, B flat? Well, G, they're pretty similar, right? Especially when we make it the 4 chord in first inversion. So the D is, the first 2 notes are exactly the same. So 4/6 is a common substitution for a 6 chord in a deceptive resolution. So in exactly this. 5, instead of going to 6, goes to 4/6. That is not uncommon. And in addition to that similarity in terms of pitches, you have the power of the scale. This cannot be underestimated, whether ascending or descending. You can do almost anything if you have a scale that goes up, because the human ear hears that pattern, understands it, and allows for unusual chord progressions because of that, the power of the ascending scale. So that's something to keep in mind. Moving forward, we have E, C, C, A. Well, let me just jot that down because that's pretty weird, right? E, C, second C, and then an A. And then here, the A turns to a G. So this A turns to a G. Well, A, C, E, that looks like an A minor triad, a 3 chord and 6/4 inversion. That is really uncommon. Normally you don't find your 3 or 6 chord in any inversion. Usually 3 and 6 are in root position, almost always. So perhaps there's another way that we can analyze that. What if the A is a non-chord tone? And really what we have is C, E, G, especially with the doubled C, giving us that extra emphasis to that pitch, leads me to believe that this really is a 5/6 chord, and that this A is an accented passing tone. Harmonically, where we're going, that makes a lot of sense, because we're coming up to F, A, 2 Cs. That's a 1 chord. Now it's a 1 chord with an unusual doubling for the first half of beat 1. The C gets tied over. And then it goes to a regular doubling right there. So irregular doubling restores the normal doubling. Why did Bach do that? To keep the music interesting, so that you have a little syncopation, a little something interesting, and because he's setting something up. What is he going to set up? Well, let's look at this next chord. C, B flat. This F is held over, right? It's a quarter note on this, starts on the and of one, so it's still happening on B2. So C, B flat, F, G. That is not a chord that we would normally expect. Something in there is a non-chord tone. Well, the answer is the F. So he leaps up. Anytime you have a leap, that brings attention to itself. So you leap up to the F, draw attention, and then it turns into a suspension. So right there, that F becomes a suspension. You could re-articulate it, but you don't have to. And what you have is a C7. There's the resolution on the and of 2. So really the chord is C, E, G, B flat. And then finally F, A, C, F, a 1 chord in root position. So our chord progression is pretty common. This 4 chord as a substitution for 6 is the only thing that's even slightly unusual. And you can see how just three non-chord tones are utilized to kind of create something that's very interesting. All right, moving forward, let's take a look at this example. 4 flats. It starts with an A flat major triad. It ends with an A flat major triad. Therefore, it is a good bet we are on the key of A flat major. So this is A flat, C, double to E flat. That is a 1/6 chord. Here we have E flat, G, B flat, D flat. You'll notice when I'm pointing out the notes to you, I'm figuring out in my head which one's the root and going up in thirds. If that's something that doesn't happen quickly, you need to then write out all the notes. So you could simply say, well, there's a B flat down here, then there's a D flat, then there's a G, then there's an E flat. And then you determine, well, which one can you stack thirds on top? Just go third, up a third, up a third, up a third. The only one that you can do that with is the E flat. Okay? So, it's an E flat 7 chord, but it's not in root position. The B flat, which is the 5th of the chord, is in the bass. Therefore, it is second inversion, and you label it as 5-4-3. Our next chord, A flat, doubled, C, E flat, a 1 chord with traditional doubling. Moving to E flat, G, double the B flat, that is a 5 chord in first inversion. Where would we expect that to go? 1. And it does. Not right away though. We have a D flat right there on the downbeat. That D flat resolves to our chord. So we really want A flat, C, E flat. We don't get to it right away. So whenever you get to a chord that you have maybe a little problems analyzing, it doesn't fit into a traditional triad or 7th chord, assume that one of those notes is a non-chord tone. And the best way to figure out which one it is by looking ahead to the next beat or half of a beat and say, well, if that note were to be the part of the chord and not the one on the downbeat that looks confusing, would it make a chord that makes sense, follows common chord progressions? And if that's the case, your work is done. So in this case, A flat, D flat, E flat is not a chord, it's not a triad, it's not a 7th chord. Well, let's look forward here. How about if we take the C instead of the D flat? Well, then it's a 1 chord, exactly what we expect. So we would circle that D flat and say, well, how is it approached? By a leap up and resolved by step down. That is an appoggiatura. We then go to B flat, D flat, F, which is a 2 chord in first inversion. we then go to E flat, C, A flat. Now that I did not do in stacking it in root position. The A flat is the root, so this would be a 1, 6, 4 chord. I'd expect that right here towards the cadence to go to a 5 chord. E flat, G, B flat, D flat. That is a 5-7 chord. This C here is just this grace note. It's part of the 1-6-4 chord. It's not a non-chord tone. 5-7 we expect to go to 1. That's exactly what we do. So there you have a way that you can, again, we are analyzing and observing how the masters have used 5-7 and the 7th chord in various inversions. Now, the most common 7th chord is 5-7 and its inversions. That's what's most frequently heard in music. The next most common 7th chord is the 2 chord, the supertonic. So the supertonic 7th chord. In a major key, it is a minor triad with a minor 7th. So you could say minor triad with a minor 7th would be one way to designate that. In a minor key, the 2 chord is half diminished 7, which means it is a diminished triad with a minor 7. This would be for minor keys. You'll notice and remember that 5-7 is a major minor 7th chord both in major keys and in minor keys. The sonority does not change. However, the supertonic chord, the 2 chord, does change sonorities depending on whether you are in a major or minor key. Some of the rules we have already learned still in play. The 7th of the chord resolves down by step. Nothing new, same deal. How you approach the 7th of the chord is still important and still has the same rules. Suspension, passing tone, neighbor tone, or appoggiatura are all valid ways to approach the 7th of the chord. Suspension and passing tone are far more common than neighbor tone and appoggiatura. So that's why I say verses here. Suspension and passing tone, what's common, what's most frequently used, versus neighbor tone, appoggiatura, what's less common, less frequently used. Now, one thing to do is, as you're, again, learning these hints on how to write awesome music, or rules, depending on what context you are in, asking the question why. Well, why is suspension and passing tone so much more common than neighbor tone and appoggiatura? And that's a topic for another day. But don't forget to ask why. There's a reason. It's one of the reasons music is so amazing, is that there's a reason behind just about everything. And it has to do with acoustics and human perception, and how human beings process music and how they process art. But moving forward, you can have incomplete 7th chords, just like we had for the 5-7. You can also have it for the supertonic chords. You always have to have the root in the 7th. Those are not any, you can never leave those notes out. We've talked about leaving out the 5th, and that works great for a minor 7 sonority or even a major 7 sonority. Whenever there's a perfect 5th, it's easy to leave it out. The perfect 5th is almost implied. However, if it is a half diminished 7 sonority, or even a fully diminished 7 sonority, meaning a diminished 5th, you leave out the 3rd. And that makes a lot of sense. You couldn't say that D, let's say we're in the key of C major and we go D, F, C. The human ear is not going to hear that as a half diminished 7 chord. Your ear is going to assume a perfect 5th. unless told otherwise. So the only way to tell it otherwise would be to have an A flat in there and leave out the F. As soon as you have this, now your ear is going to start assuming the F. That will become assumed. So when you do double a note in a 7th chord, supertonic 7th or any, the most common doubling is the root. Right? You will never double the 7th of the chord or scale degree 7. So let me say that again. You'll never double the 7th of the chord or scale degree 7, which is the same thing as saying the leading tone. For the supertonic 7th chord, first inversion is by far the most common position you'll find it in, even more common than root position. The reason for that is that its similarity between a 2-6-5 and a 4 chord is very similar. There's a lot of similarities. So, if we're, let's say, treble clef, key of C major, a 4 chord would be F, A, C. A 2-6-5 would be F, A, C with a D. So you can see the similarities between 4 and 2-6-5. It is that exact similarity that allows sometimes for composers to substitute 2-6-5 for 4 in a plagal cadence. So the amen cadence, plagal cadence, if we were to have, let's say, let me do it a little differently. Imagine instead two, 6, 5 every now and then is used that way. I bring this up because I don't think it really functions as a supertonic chord, so you probably shouldn't analyze it that way. I would prefer to analyze something like that as a 4 add 6 chord, meaning a 4 chord, add the 6th note, the 6th of the chord to that. But I bring that up because sometimes you will find in an analysis 2-6-5 going to 1. And you might say, Dr. B, but 2 doesn't go to 1. 2 goes to maybe 1-6-4, maybe 7 diminished 6, maybe 5 or 5-7, but according to your chart, it doesn't go to 1. And I'll say, you're right. That's because in this case, it looks like a 2-6-5, but it's not functioning like a 2-6-5. It's really functioning like a 4 chord with an add 6. So that's a little something to file away in the back of your mind for when you are doing analysis. So let's take a quick look at the possible ways in which a 2 chord, a 2-7 chord, a supertonic 7th chord, can move and resolve to other chords. It can go to 1-6-4. Which you'll notice I put the bracket and then a 5 chord. It's because this 1-6-4 is really not functioning like tonic. It's functioning like a 5 chord. It's a cadential 6-4. So I'm going to be using that phrase more and more the more advanced we get. Does the chord actually function like the Roman numeral? Function means it's following that chart of harmonic progressions. Sometimes the answer is no. This is one of our earliest and most common examples. So, if we're going to part write that, we know that a 1-6-4 will have a C in the bass. We know that the 7th of the chord, the 2 chord, has to resolve down. So we know, I'm sorry, it's not going to resolve down yet, because there is no. So we have to get FAC. So the F will stay. We need 2 C's. A. So we would voice lead it like that, and then that 7th, even though it's not the 7th in this chord, it still has to resolve down. It's just a delayed resolution of the 7th. So here's where that E comes. So let me say that part again, because that's important. This is the 7th of the 2 chord. It must resolve down by step as soon as possible. The next chord actually might not be as soon as possible. It might not have the E in it that it wants to go to, but it's going to get there eventually. So it does happen here. C stays here. Here we move to the G. And that's how we would part write that example. Now let's take that same voicing, that same 2-7, and go to 7 diminished 6 instead of this 1-6-4-5. Here, what happens is we need E, G, B flat, and we're going to have two Gs. We're doubling the G because we always double the third of a diminished triad to lessen the dissonance of the tritone. So G stays in our bass. Our F goes down to the E like it has to. We want to double that G, so I go like this. Normally, my first instinct would be to maintain that B flat as the common tone, but that does not work because I need to double the G, and I don't want to jump the D up or down by such a significant leap. So instead of maintaining the common tone, I move that down a third, and I move that down the D down a third. I'd rather move by thirds than maintain a common tone and have a leap of a fifth or a fourth. 2-6-5. Now we're dealing with 2 chord in an inversion. So 2-6-5 going to 5. We're going to step up to the C. The F is the 7th, has to resolve down. We do that. Maintain the G, double the C. So again, we're looking at all these easy, quick ways to voice lead. Because if you're under pressure, you got a deadline, you need to write something, you want to be moving as quickly as possible. Let's say 2-6-5, instead of going to 5, go to 5-4-2. In this case, the B flat stays in the bass. We then need the C. The G stays here, our F still goes down. You'll notice that the 7th of the chord still resolves down by step. 5-4-3, how would that look? 5-4-3 going to 5-7. Here we have D in the bass, it must move to C in the bass. The B flat is the 7th, it stays. The F moves down by step, that's our 7th resolving. Our G stays as a common tone. So we get to have common tone, 7th resolves down by step, bass goes down by step. Parallel thirds, those are fine. And then lastly, 2-4-2 to 5-6-5. That means the F resolves down a step to the E. Our B flat stays the same. Our G is a common tone. And we move to a C right there. Okay? So, these are the rules. You'll notice that I'm always looking towards keeping a common tone, unless I would have to have a leap of a fourth or a fifth, in which case I then try to find parallel movement by thirds as a way to create smooth voice leading. So that is the Supertonic 7th chord.